Welcome back to the Bernard Lee Poker Show. We are talking with four-time WSOP bracelet winner Anthony Zinno here, who won 2 bracelets already in the 2021 World Series. That is now continuing the trend of every year somebody winning 2 bracelets. Won the 10K stud and then the $1,500 horse. Anthony, I want to get your advice to help out my listeners. A lot of my listeners are no limit hold'em players, like we talked about previously. But stud, it's very funny for me. When I started playing back in the 90s, we'd go down to Foxwoods when Foxwoods first opened up in 92. And me and a buddy would rent a car from, get this, Rent-A-Wreck. Literally, that was the place in Brookline, I think it was, or no, Coolidge, I forget, wherever. We drive down. I play 5, 10, 10, 20 stud high. He would play this game with all these community cards, and he told me later it was called Texas Hold'em. I had no idea what the hell he was playing, obviously, and his was limit. There was no limit back then. But I love stud, and it's funny because people talk about it, and they always say to me, oh, stud high is the hardest game for me to learn. I'm like, really? Because it was my game back then. I remember reading Doyle's Super System and the section that Chip Reese wrote, etc. I always have difficulty with high-low because I was such a stud high player. It's very hard to switch it. And I think people who are stud high-low players have the difficulty going to just stud high. Yeah. But what I'd love for you, if you don't mind, is giving us 2 or 3 pieces of advice for stud, for people who just don't play stud, that I think it's one of the classic games in poker that you really should know how to play. And for people who don't know how to play it, could you give them some pieces of advice of how to kind of play the game and play it proficiently?
Yeah, so basically you want to obviously make sure that you start with a hand that can get somewhere. Like, you don't want to be starting with like 5, 6, 7 offsuit and just assuming that you're going to make a straight. Like lots of people make mistakes where they kind of just they end up trying to go to battle with hands like that and getting in trouble. More specifically though, 5th Street is where the big bet comes in stud. Okay. And basically you kind of have to make the biggest decision on that street, because that's where you want to say, listen, am I going to end up wanting to go with this hand all the way to 7th? Or like, is this not looking so hot? Because like, 3rd Street, otherwise known as pre-flop sometimes, you can kind of like, you can complete or call someone's completion and kind of see what 4th brings. And then 4th is just going to be the small bet street to see what 5th brings. So a lot of times you can get to 5th and, without losing a lot of chips. But once at 5th is where you really have to start making the decisions. And, but that being said, the stud equities usually run a lot closer than people think. So, I mean, for example, if the guy or gal to your right completes with a king up, and you have, a pair of queens, like you have, like, say you have like jack queen in the hole and a queen up, you can go ahead and be aggressive with it. I mean, you can raise their completion because sometimes they're just, a good amount of the time they're just bluffing that they have a king. They might just have like a ace king 5 or something, and just like, they just want to represent that they have a pair of kings and try to take down the antes. So you can raise, and then you can keep being aggressive with that your pair of queens, because even if he did start with a pair of kings, he or she, and then you started with the pair of queens, you can just get there, make 2 pair, make trips, make whatever you make. And so aggression can be key, but you really want to try to pay attention to where you're at. You don't want to just be blindly betting your cards. You want to be looking at your opponent's boards and be wary of flushes getting there. Lots of people, when they complete a small card, they oftentimes are on some kind of a flush draw, and then when that let's say they've got a diamond up, and that next diamond comes and they start getting aggressive, be careful, because you're oftentimes they're in pretty good shape with a solid flush draw. So overall, my advice would be first of all, with any game, like, putting in the hours of practice. But yeah, you want to make sure to start with something that has good playability. So that means at least have a pair that you don't have any dead cards, that from, for all the face-up cards that first came out. You're not like, if you have like sixes in the hole, that can be a very strong hand sometimes. But if there's a 6 up somewhere, then it really is killing your hand equity a lot.
And I think
So
what you're saying also is that with regards to the watching, when you're playing No Limit Hold'em, everyone's saying you got to pay attention. You shouldn't be just listening to your headphones. You shouldn't be just watching the TVs, etc. In that scenario, you're really watching the players, and you're really
yes,
trying to see how they play. Did they
yeah,
bet big when they didn't have it, or bluffing, etc. But in stud, because so many of the cards are up, and
yeah,
they're, you obviously have
yeah,
4 cards up, 3 down, and until
hmm
7th street you have only 2 down. So
hmm
many are up. You have to be paying attention, full attention, to all of the
everything.
cards and what's going on,
Yeah,
etc. Without that, like you said, you have a pair of 6s, you didn't notice that 2 of the 6s were out. You're playing dead, basically. You're
pretty
just
dead.
playing for that 6, and you have to
Yeah,
make that second pair
yeah.
impossible to get that trip. Would you agree with like that's so important in stud?
It's a very good point. Yeah, when you're playing No Limit Hold'em, what you're paying attention to is you're trying to get reads, you're trying to look at people's bet sizing and things
Right,
like that, right?
right,
But in,
right,
in stud, that stuff doesn't matter as much. The physical reads, and obviously there's no sizing.
right,
So like, you're looking at those up cards, and that matters a lot. But like, at the same time, I want to say to people that are trying to learn stud for the first time, to not be intimidated by that. Don't think like, oh my God, I don't have the memorization skills, remember everything that came out first. I mean, like, you'll know, like, basically if you start with like 3 spades, like, it's only natural to look and see what other spades are out there,
right,
and just know that
right,
obviously with each spade out there, it's decreasing your chances of making a flush. Like, and beyond that, like, it just kind of comes, paying attention to those up cards. It comes naturally with experience. But yeah, it's definitely a huge factor in the game. It makes it fun. It makes it a whole different experience where you're paying attention to something different than you would be in a no limit hold'em
right, right.
game.
Well, also, like, the other thing is the straight draws, right? So if you're starting out with, let's say, Queen Jack 10,
Mhm.
you really want to look at the direct related cards, which would be the
Yep.
king and the 9, and then
Yes.
the next secondary related card, which would be the ace and the 8. And so
Yep.
if those cards are off out of the deck, or they're
Mhm.
up, well, now your
Mhm.
odds of making that straight have gone down, and so
Yep.
your playability slowly goes down as well.
Yes.
So
So
um,
specifically the ones that are connected. So like, if you have a 9-10 jack, yeah, the 8 and the queen, those are very, very important, because like, being dealt one of those means that then you can become the aggressor and start pounding it once you have the
right,
open-ended straight draw. And that ability to be aggressive, bet, can sometimes generate folds when you only have a straight draw, and your opponent only has like a small pair. They just, on 6th street, they just give up.
right,
So that ability to, yeah. So you want to pay attention if you have started with a straight draw, to those cards that you really need to continue. With flush draw, of course, the same thing, and Broadway draws and the like. You want to pay attention to what's out there, but at the same time, again, not to be too intimidated, because it's not going to change. Most of the time, the up cards aren't going to change your equity drastically unless it's just so clear. I mean, sometimes you have an ace in the hole and there are 3 aces up, things like that, spots that are more obvious. But yeah,
right.
it makes the game really fun. So I highly recommend that people try playing stud, small stakes on the sites, and giving it a go.
How important is the 3-bet in stud? Because in No Limit Hold'em, someone
Yeah,
bets, you can now put a drastic big bet, and then it forces everyone to fold. When it's a
yeah,
limit game, it's just a bet, right? So someone
yeah,
bets 1, it's almost like you have to just call because of the pot odds. But the 3-bet suddenly changes the ballgame, because now somebody has to call 2 bets, or even call
yeah,
3 bets if it's cold. How
yeah,
important is that to time that just right, to really take advantage of knocking out players, especially in stud high, because it's a scoop bet. It's a single pot
scoop game. Yeah,
game, instead of it being high low, where as Michael Miyazaki was very clear to point out, is that sometimes you don't want to knock them out because now you lose the person who's feeding the pot when you're going to be splitting it with the other person.
Yeah, you said don't want to knock them out. What you mean is you don't want to get them out. You want them in the hand, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. To Michael's point, yeah. So like in stud high low, that's where the games differ greatly. So if you start with a monster in stud high low, you can comfortably let the pot go 5 ways sometimes, whatever,
Right.
because you're looking at a good opportunity to probably chop, take half of a big pot that gets built up multi-way. Or sometimes get that magical scoop, which is like the best feeling ever in stud high low.
Of course.
But in stud high, because the equities run so close, so if some guy or gal in the pot has starts with a pair of sevens, and someone starts with a pair of aces, and someone starts with a flush draw, and you have all 3 of those hands battle all the way to 7th, each of those hands, the equity isn't that far off.
Right.
Each one. I mean, like, you would think that the pair of the small pair would be like quite a big dog going 3-way, but I mean, they hit trips on 6th or whatever. Stuff happens. Right. So that being said, your goal in stud high, more specifically stud high tournaments, is you really want to try to isolate and you want to try to get heads up because, if you're going 3-way, then you're increasing your chances of having to risk losing a pot. Your risk versus reward factor becomes higher, but in tournaments it's all about trying to slow and steady, stay in and make small gains. So if you can get heads up and stud high, then you have a better opportunity to know where you're at in the hand, and you have a better opportunity to go ahead and either bluff your opponent off of the hand, or go ahead and make the best hand. Whereas 3-way or 4-way and stud high, I mean, it's just so hard to get people off of their hands, right?
Right.
So you're looking at at that point you're just kind of gambling. But hey, that's poker too, So yeah.
So are you trying to make that 2-3 bet? A lot of times I've seen that a lot of times you'll make it on 4th Street, and the reason being is that it is a 2 or 3 bet, but because it's a small bet, it's like less risk, but yet feeling like it's a bigger deal than it really is. Do you kind of sense that happens a lot of times?
Yeah, I think a lot of us will make the raise on 4th Street because we want to sort of take control of the action in stud high. So when you take control of the action, all of a sudden the red flag pops up in your opponent's head, like, oh gosh, like, do they have trips? Do they have 2 pair already? They have aces in the hole? Do they have like a monster, whatever? Like, so if you can take the action early in the hand, you give yourself a better opportunity to open up bluff spots in case you miss or whatever. So aggression in stud high can really be quite key, particularly in tournaments. In cash games, you have more time in a stud cash game to kind of wait to play a multi-way pot where you make the monster and you scoop a big pot, but a lot of those times those hands don't go your way. You miss 7th Street, you miss that draw, whatever, and then you lose some money that you will get back over time. But in a tournament, you want to really try to like lower your variance. And the surprising way to lower your variance, similarly to like having, say, jacks and no limit hold'em, when someone raises, the reason why we're raising jacks a lot of the time is because you're pretty much trying to get heads up. Same reason, you want to deny equity to people behind, opponents that are behind you in the hand. You don't want to call and then someone behind you calls with Queen 9 suited, and like they have so much equity versus your jacks, right?
Right.
So it's that same idea, but just as a quick side note, like Michael apparently had said, in stud high low, it's different because in that game, you can deny some equity and you want to minimize opponents in the pot sometimes with certain hands, but for the most part, you have a fun like a 4, 6, 7 with 2 hearts, and like you can let that go ahead and go multi-way because if you make a monster, you're going to get paid more now, right?
Right.
So
it's very interesting because I think that is definitely something that you really, as a stud high player, it definitely took me, this was years ago, we had this conversation, but when I was first starting to do a lot of high-low, I was like, really? Why? Like,
Yeah.
I thought you'd want to go. He goes, no, think about it. If you've got low, he's got high, you knock everyone else out. You guys are just putting money in the middle. So what? And it's just coming right back. You need that third person to feed the pot, to be that person that you're taking money from. And all of a sudden it goes, but of course you do that and then you get sucked out on, right? And then your 74 low suddenly gets stung by a 65, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, what it is, the main factor here is about the bluff equity. So in stud high low, frankly, you just have less bluffs don't really work as well in stud high low, because usually someone's just calling you down and they end up making whether they make a shitty low or a shitty high. By the time that seventh is there, they're like so committed they just call, whatever it might be. So that's why, like, knowing that you're not really going to have much bluff equity in a heads up stud high low pot is why you might as well just go ahead and let a few other people in the pot sometimes. But in stud high, you really can have that bluff equity can play a huge part. Taking it down on fifth or sixth with a mediocre hand can feel really good sometimes.
I want to ask you about that 10K stud final table. It was a big deal. It was a big final table, not only because Phil Hellmuth is trying to win his, at the time, 16th bracelet.
Yeah.
But you also had a legend, another Hall of Famer, Jack McClelland was there as well.
What a legend.
I mean, so many eyes had to have been on this table as you're there. What was it like for you to be playing at this final table? Because, I mean, really, this was something else where so many, again, so many eyes were on this. I mean, Stephen Chitwick was there too. We're not even mentioning one of the best players in the world too. But the eyes were all on this final table, especially early on. It must have been, I know you were playing in it, but it must have been one of those like, wow, this is really special that I'm part of this.
Amazing. I mean, like, still don't quite feel like I belong there playing a stud 10K championship final table with Jack and Hellmuth quite yet. But, I mean, it just happens. I've been playing stud now since, like, it's funny how the years fly by, but I started playing a lot. Started playing a little in 2013, and then I started playing a lot around 2015, 16. So, the years go by, and then all of a sudden you present that opportunity for yourself. But Jack is the nicest poker player that I've ever met. That man his smile can like light up a whole room. What a cool guy. Awesome. And a legend. So it was kind of like, it was funny you have that like dichotomy between Jack and Phil. But right. And then Stevie, absolute poker legend, and always playing his absolute heart out. So anyone who hasn't watched it yet, it's on Poker Go. It's a lengthy one, but like it's probably 8 hours long or whatever. But it's good. It's there's some high level stud being played. Every player at that table was playing quite well. James Chen in there too. By the way, James is a high stakes, no limit crusher, cash games, Macau and otherwise. Very, very brilliant guy, and he was there battling right to my left, and we went heads up, and so it was no easy feat along the way. I obviously ran quite well, and I think I played very well. It was. I mean, what a great. It was fun, and then of course the Hellmuth blow up.
Yeah, so talk a little bit about that. Like, obviously this was the one where a lot of people criticized it. We talked to Phil about it, and he did admit that he probably went way too far for himself. But what kind of a lot of it was at you, obviously, because you were doing so well against him. And if you watch some of the hands, it literally was like his chip stack here, your chip stack there. About 30 minutes later, it just went, because obviously seesaw. 2 or 3 hands just went your way.
Yeah, actually, the funny thing is, if people go rewatch the stream, actually, what really got him going was a hand versus Stevie, where Stevie had gone all the way to 7th with like some dust, like a pair of 5s in the hole. Right. He just didn't fold. and Hellmuth had him crushed the whole way, and then Stevie Rivert or 7th streeted a miracle trips.
Trip.
And I think got max value or whatever it was, and Hellmuth like kind of blew up. But the thing is that Hellmuth still had plenty of chips to work with at that point.
Right.
So I think he was kind of like,
the
these
fuse
kids
was lit. Let's put it that way, right?
That's right. The fuse was lit on that hand, but he still had ammo to fight with. The thing is that when I got there, I had started the hand with 3 diamonds, ace high, and funny thing about that hand is the 6th street I actually checked, and Phil just checked his pair of queens back. He wasn't sure where he was at. So it was actually a relatively standard stud hand. And then I got there on 7th. As soon as I saw that diamond on 7th, I knew that when I bet and he called that it was going to be a classic blow up. So I knew right away. I knew before the whole world that this was coming. Like, here it comes. The explosion is coming. And it's funny. I mean, it's good. It's good to see people laugh, because we need that in the game. We need we want that, people watch it and enjoy it, and even if they don't care about stud, they can still enjoy watching the final table just to watch the personalities clash. I'm just sitting there quietly, in my zone doing my thing, and little comments here and there. I actually trolled him a little bit too after it. People didn't pick up on it too well, but I had a ace 10-5 of diamonds to start or whatever, and I knew he had a pair of queens, and after it I was like, oh wait, I thought I had ace king, I was trolling him. I was like, I think I had a king in the hole to go with my ace in the hole. And he's like, wait, no, you didn't have a king. And I was like, I think I did, kind of just playing around. But yeah, I'll have my fun too. I mean, me and Phil have been playing together mostly during the series, but kind of everywhere since 2014. We've started playing together. And then in 15, we played the 1-drop together. I remember him being like, kid, I'm gonna get you soon. That whole thing he does, that whole you're gonna give me all your chips, that whole thing. And we got to know each other. We've had drinks at Aria together over the years, and like everyone says, off the table he's the most gentle giant, and then on the table he does his thing, and I don't mind it. The only time I ever mind when people do their blow up things, which happens a good amount in mixed games, where they'll lose, and then on the river after the hand they do that thing where they look at their cards and look and wait, and kind of want to show their cards, kind of show their table, oh, look at the bad beat I took.
Right.
And all this stuff, it's a thing they do. It's not my thing, but it's just a thing that's done in mixed games. I get a kick out of the dynamic there. It's like they want sympathy or something. If I lose a pot, I don't want sympathy. I just want to move along. I don't know, but they want for some reason, they want this validation or something. I don't know what it is. They want everyone to know, look what I had.
They played the hand right, and they just were bad beat. Right?
Yeah. I hope people always from my career think that I misplay my hands. That's what I want. I want
right,
that.
Of course.
Anyway,
they
do that thing, and it's cool. It's fine. It's part of whatever. But as long as they don't take too long to muck and move along, I'm fine. So in this case, Hellmuth he did his ranting and blowing up, but it really didn't slow the game down much at all. Yeah. Right. Only a little bit. He does it as thing for a second, but he mucks. You move along. The dealers are Dominic and Alex were on point, moving that game fast. So it's as long as that's happening, I don't mind. But if someone does the blow up stuff and they're not mucking, or there's time going by, out of respect for other players in the hand, it's come on, that's when I may have even called the floor in that case. But in this case, it's okay. Whatever.
Anthony, congratulations. 4 bracelets, 2 this year, and really seriously in the running. We hope that you take it down. If you do, we're going to have to bring you back on and talk about player of the year. But congratulations, my friend, now 4-time WSOP bracelet winner.
Thank you, Bernie.
Anthony Zinno here on the Bernard Lee Poker Show. Listen, we're going to continue bringing you winners of the bracelets for a while to come. It's always great to catch up with good friends as well. And as always, may you always go in with the best hand, and may you never get unlucky. Good night, everybody.